And like you said, you really do have to know what it is you're looking for as well on these certs, because there is a lot of information there, and you can, very easily get lost in what's there and say, oh yeah, they've got all the coverage. But if you don't verify, you don't know for sure.
You don't know for sure. And I'm glad you mentioned it again. You always want to follow up with an email to the verbal conversation you had.
Yeah.
Because you never want to get into a he said, she said.
Absolutely.
If something goes wrong. The last thing I'll say about that piece is that you want to look at the entire certificate of insurance, just not certain verbiage.
Yeah.
We've seen certificates where you'll have the, hard auto liability box check, non-dome, any autos, so all that's checked.
Welcome to the ThinkFreight podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Wardine, and it's my pleasure to announce today's guest, Drew Singleton, the COI Coach, on today's show. Drew, welcome to the ThinkFreight podcast. Thanks for coming on today.
Hey, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I've been following your content for a while, and you're doing a lot of really good work in terms of, bringing attention to the certificate of insurance within the freight brokerage and logistics space. And I wanted to have you on to really talk a little bit more about that process and kind of about, the COI. It's kind of one of those forgotten pieces of information within the industry. I feel like there's a lot of bad information out there in terms of a COI and what to look for when vetting new carriers. So, I really appreciate, what you're doing and wanted to have you on to talk about that a little bit more. So that's great. So let's dive into your background a little bit and how you really found yourself, doing this within the supply chain space. How'd you get here?
Well, I started my career working for Viking Freight Systems. Mm-hmm. They're now owned by FedEx Freight. Yeah. At the time at Viking, I worked. Started off, at the bottom level, dock operations, in and outbound dock operations. Did a little bit of driving over the first year I was there, and from there, I had an opportunity to move into the compliance side of the freight business. Got into OS&D, pre-claim investigations, things of that nature. But Viking was very good at compliance as a whole. So being an employee there, you were exposed to a lot of different things.
Yeah. And
so that's where I kind of got my start. However, after being with Viking for 7 years, I went to work for a smaller regional type motor carrier. Mm-hmm. They operated as local drayage, local pickup and delivery LTL. They had a line haul operation and a truckload operation. Also operated as a freight forwarder and a freight broker. So as you can see, we had a lot of different liability hats going on. The saying is that if you're going to move a shipment as a motor carrier, that's what you tell the customer. That's what you should be moving it as.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
So, one of my responsibilities at that time was to make sure that each entity within the company operated and stayed in their space.
Absolutely.
And because we were operating as a freight forwarder and also a freight broker and doing business with a lot of motor carriers across the country, is that certificate of insurance and contracts, transportation service agreements contracts became very important.
Definitely.
And so that's kind of how I got into it.
No, that's really fascinating. So you said you were at Viking for about 7 years. How long were you with the smaller regional carrier that had a lot of those exposures?
It was Far West Freight Systems. I was with them for 11 years.
Okay. How would you say, for some of the, like, Viking was a pretty big operation. How
Yes.
would you say that, though, like, coming from the big world of freight, and a big corporate company like Viking, to a, like, not to say that the other one wasn't as corporate, but to a smaller company in terms of their size and their regional reach. How was that in terms of making that transition into what you're kind of currently doing?
Well, I would say that I wouldn't want to paint it with broad
Definitely
brush. I would say that
understand.
specifically for the company that I went to far west, uh, they were in restructuring or expanding their
Hmm.
operations, and so there wasn't a lot of support there in respects to what I had to do.
Understood.
But I was given a latitude to go out and get the proper mentoring, the proper guidance, etc. And being able to do that really um, helped out a lot
No, that makes
and
sense.
springboarded me into doing some good things there.
No, that makes sense. And I didn't want you to paint with a broad brush. I was just kind of curious how those two stepping stones really helped you, from the big picture of getting into such a big organization like Viking, and then kind of going, not going down, but going into a smaller organization to kind of be able to do a little bit more, right? You have a little bit more of that actual, like, culture, instead of just like the corporate like feel of a big company. So I think that probably helped you a lot in terms of like your growth and being able to really expand like what you wanted to do, and how you start to approach doing compliance, and working with insurance, I'm sure.
You know what? I'm glad you phrased it that way. You're absolutely correct. With I can't say enough good things about the time I was at Viking,
Yeah.
because I'll tell you, they really had a good compliance risk management structure in place. That the old saying now that you hear all the time, you want to set up something that's realistic that you can actually
Yeah,
do.
definitely.
Viking was doing it when I was there 30 years ago.
That's awesome.
And so I was able to take that with
Yeah.
me. And so I would say that was the most important part of it, because as I moved on and I started hearing these things, I already lived it, if that makes
No, it makes
sense.
perfect sense. You were
Yeah.
experiencing, you had already experienced a lot of what other people were telling you that they were experiencing, and you were like, "Hey, I've already lived this. I know how to deal with this situation, and how to, make the changes necessary in these kind of situations." Because, like you said, Viking, like, you were exposed to so much there. It was such an expansive network of what they were doing. So you really had the opportunity to really learn and grow, and then take that skill set and knowledge and really apply it into a smaller company, and really help make them operate more like a corporate style company, a bigger company than probably what they were doing before you got there. Obviously, it sounds like you had a lot of autonomy to build out things the way you wanted to, and how kind of how you saw fit, and how you had things working at Viking. So that's really awesome that you were able to have those experiences, with two of the companies you were at, kind of so early on, but also kind of deep in your career. You'd seen a lot and had a lot of good opportunities to really to learn and grow. So I really think that's important. And kind of circling back to kind of what we opened the show with, Drew, was insurance and all the fraud going on, right? So we talked a few days ago, when we were kind of like talking about what we were going to talk about on the show, in terms of insurance, right? Because there is so much out there in terms of information, or misinformation, I guess, for lack of a better word. But with insurance and all the fraud, when a broker or a shipper is really looking to onboard new carriers, or they're looking to update information and for their carrier network, what are some of the things that pop out to you, or that they should be on the lookout for in terms of dealing with insurance? Like, what are some of the Drew go tos for to making sure that your liabilities are covered with that insurance certificate?
Well, I would say the first thing is that if you are a shipper or freight
Hmm.
broker and your primary motor carriers that you're utilizing are coming from load boards, you're going to get what you get.
Yeah.
I don't, there's really no solution for that, to be honest with you. Because, you're using them just one time. And unless you have a lot of setup time to get it done, I just don't think that's the best way to go.
Yeah, for sure.
I really believe that a freight broker or shipper should work to establish as many repeat carriers on their list as possible.
Yeah, I fully agree.
Is that going to take some time to do? Absolutely. But I just feel like it's something that needs to be done. Now, when it comes to, the things to look for, I would say that me personally, I would start with, if I was a freight broker, I would start with having an experienced transportation law attorney draft me up a freight transportation service agreement that I would have all of the motor carriers I contract with sign. That would be my
step one.
That would be our first
Yep.
step. That'd be step one. And from there, I would request certificates of insurance directly from their insurance broker or their insurance agent. Right?
Yeah,
one of the
absolutely.
two. I would request them via email. Yeah, I would request them via email, and I would only accept certificates that were returned to me via email. Now, when I talk, I've said it in the past where I always use insurance agent, insurance broker.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is there's a difference between the two.
Can you explain to the listeners what that difference is?
Well, yes. The shorter version of it is simply this. When an insurance broker responds to you with a certificate of insurance, anything that they say or misrepresent on that cert, even if it was a mistake, they own it.
Okay.
But the insurance brokerage company owns it, not the insurance company.
The brokerage.
Right? The brokerage company. So the broker, whatever company he works for, they may possibly be liable for the statements they made.
Okay.
If a claim isn't paid.
Got it.
Whether it's a vehicle accident or whether it's a cargo claim. However, if the response came from a commercial insurance agent, that agent is working directly for the insurance company and only one insurance company. Okay.
Got it.
And so the statements that they make, is very possible that the insurance company will be liable for the statements they make. The difference is in it is simply this. Some insurance brokers are very big. They got deep pockets.
Yeah.
Some of them aren't. They're small operations. So when you're dealing with an agent, you got them on the hook, but you also have their insurance company on the hook.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. No, absolutely.
So that's the difference between the two. Yes. That's the difference between the two. And so my starting point would be to request, do those two things I mentioned, have a good transportation service agreement in place, request certificates of insurance. But the thing about that is that your requests have to be very clear and precise. Don't write a book. It's got to be short,
yeah,
right?
Definitely.
And in other words, you have to know what and why you're asking for what you're asking for. And you need to understand the certificate when you get it back. It's just like people will say, and I agree. If you don't have a strong reputation or a lot of experience as being a safety director, you should be reading safety plans from a trucking company.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so it's the same thing with a certificate of insurance. You have to know what you're looking at. I think that mistakes that some people make is they'll look at the cert and they'll say, okay, well, it has auto liability box, right?
Yep.
And just assume that the coverage that they need may be there. It may not be there.
Now,
any autos, for instance, does not necessarily mean that it's going to be the type of policy that's going to cover an over-the-road heavy-duty tractor. I've
Yep.
seen it where it's simply not that way. Say hard autos or non-autos, for instance, right? If the symbols aren't checked, then you don't know whether it's hard autos for a pickup truck or for a semi.
Yep, exactly.
Now, the reason that you would want hard autos would be, say, for instance, and this happens on a regular basis. You'll give a load to a motor carrier. The motor carrier is in the process of moving your load. And at 12 o'clock at night or 1 o'clock in the morning, there's a breakdown.
Yep. Happens all the time.
The motor carrier has a choice. It happens all the time. The motor carrier has a choice. They can wake you up at 1 o'clock in the morning and tell you there's a problem that you can't even fix. Or they can reach out to someone that they know, another motor carrier, that might have a driver in the area that can pick that load up and get it to where it needs to be. Did they, in essence, did they double broker it? Yeah, they did. But if they're going to pay that motor carrier, who cares, right? Does that make sense?
No,
I get it. Because at the end of the day, you want the load delivered, right? So they're not going to do anything nefarious or be underhanded.
They're not just trying to do anything crazy. They're just trying to not screw themselves over by, potentially losing a relationship, but also not trying to screw, us over as the broker and saying, hey, we screwed up or the truck broke down. They don't want to, they're trying to salvage on both ends, but in that scope, they're opening up a whole can of liability that no one knows about except for them and another motor carrier.
That's true. However, if that motor carrier that you originally hired, if they have hard auto liability and the proper symbols are attached and they hand it off to another motor carrier and that motor carrier gets involved in an accident, you're covered.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Not only by the motor carrier that had the accident, but the motor carrier that you hired. Their policy will provide you some defense and indemnity. That's what's important about it.
No, that's
okay. That's what's important about it. Right. That's what's important about it. The same thing with commercial general liability, for instance, right? Contractual liability is an endorsement that's attached to that general liability. And if you have the right contractual liability policy in place and a loss occurs, and as a freight broker, you're drug into it, even though you didn't do anything wrong, there's going to be possibly defense dollars there for you if you're being sued.
Okay. That makes sense.
And so, those are some of the things that I look at. Now, is there a deeper dive? Yes, there is, but we wouldn't have enough time to discuss it here.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But those are the things that, you want to look at. The same thing I would say that with your trailer physical damage, right? You that's very important as well. Because and I would say that really in the context of knowing the motor carrier that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
And the only way you're going to really know them is to have a good relationship with them over time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so say, for instance, if, a motor carrier, when you're looking at trailer physical damage, okay, it could be scheduled, right? So the VIN numbers are there, right?
Yep.
Okay. But what happens if that freight winds up on a trailer that doesn't match the VIN numbers that are on that certificate?
What happens?
Well, if there's an accident that occurs, and that tractor and trailer has to be towed, it might be 30, 45 days before you even find out about it.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Because what happens is that what has happened, I've seen it many, many times. The load winds up with an owner-operator. That owner-operator had, his own trailer physical damage coverage. Trailer physical damage coverage, just like hard autos and non-owned autos and cargo, is not attached to a motor carrier's authority to operate. So therefore, if they cancel it, their authority is still active, right? And so an accident occurs, the owner operator or whoever doesn't have trailer physical damage coverage, so therefore they can't pay that tow bill. And they just disappear.
Wow.
Dispatcher doesn't know where they're at. No one knows where to load it. They just disappear, right? And it could be several days. It could be a few weeks, whatever, before you actually find the load. It could have a tracking system on it, but that's a different story. I'm just saying that it's always good if a motor carrier also has hired auto physical damage.
Yeah. No, that
because
makes
the same
sense.
thing with same thing with the hired autos liability, right?
Yeah.
If the load winds up on a different trailer, you possibly got some coverage there.
No, that's really interesting and definitely really good for people out there to like be looking for and making sure they're like looking for that information. Now you had mentioned something pretty interesting, that when you're requesting information from, whether that's an insurance agent or insurance broker, that you have to know, like you have to be concise and you have to know what to ask. What should be asked? What questions, in that quick email should you be asking, for the best, I guess I'll just say it for lack of a better term, for best cover your ass scenario, basically.
Well, one of the things several things we do,
Yeah.
and one of them is we make it very clear in our email what the relationship is between the freight broker and the motor carrier. So we're laying that
That
out.
makes sense. That's a good way to start it.
Yeah, we're starting it there. We make it clear that we want to be additional insured on the policies, whether it's general liability, auto, cargo. No, you can't be
Yeah.
additional insured, but you can't be loss paying. So we just make those points clear, right?
Absolutely.
And we also make it clear to, when I say making identifying the relationship, is that we often get certificates of insurance from either the agent or the broker. And once we look at it, we can tell that auto liability that's on there doesn't apply to what we thought it did, right? So in a situation where if it was a disguise and we didn't catch it and we found out later that there was some coverage issues, we have something to hang our hat on.
Yeah.
We said to these people, this is what the coverage is for. You sent us a cert for pickup trucks.
Yep. No, and that's why I wanted to ask, because there's I've seen a lot of instances, especially recently, where insurance, like your brokers are accepting insurance and then not following up with an insurance agent or broker and actually looking at this information. I saw one that, I think it was I was somewhere on Reddit or Twitter, that a compliance manager or compliance person, missed a VIN that was on there, and it was like a Gator, 4x4, like one of those, and it was like, the, overall they were a double broker, and they were not even insured. Like they didn't call, they didn't request by email. The load was stolen. There's a lot of things that went into it, but it just goes to show, like, you just have to be really diligent about looking at these certs and looking at the information that's right in front of you, and then sending those emails or following up. I think, Drew, you and I both have talked before about, sending that email, and if you don't get a pretty quick reply, following up by phone, and also like saying, hey, I'm gonna follow up also, what you just said with an email, and then have them confirm that as well. Is that something you guys are also doing to kind of help, cover your butts?
Absolutely. That's exactly what we
Yeah.
do for our clients, because I've said it before. Calling, and I think I mentioned it to you years ago. I said that if you make contact with the insurance agent or insurance broker, they'll tell you a lot of things that you need to know, but you have to be listening.
Yeah, absolutely.
In other words, you might have a concern about whether there's heavy-duty over-the-road tractors insured under the policy.
Right.
That might be a concern of yours. And you've sent the proper emails, but you're still kind of concerned about it.
Right.
So you call the insurance agent up, and this has happened to us many times, and we'll just ask the question, is that coverage provided under the policy? They'll say in turn, you need to ask the customer. What are they telling you?
Yeah, that they don't know, or it's not.
Of course they know. No, it's not.
Yep.
They're the agent. They know what
they're looking at it. They know if the coverage is
So So if they tell you you have to ask the customer, what they're telling you is the coverage isn't there. You have to know when to take a hint.
Yep, absolutely. That's, when I started my brokerage career at TQL, there was one of my leaders hauled a lot of frozen and fresh shrimp. So those load values were $250,000, $300,000 a lot of times. And a lot of policies for refrigerated don't even cover seafood and shellfish. So we would have to call we would have 10 loads a week, or we would end up having to call every single insurance company and then verify with an email that, number one, we were verifying that they had enough insurance coverage if something happened to the load, but also secondly, that they actually could haul shellfish. Every carrier that we booked said, "Oh yeah, man, we can haul shellfish." Call their insurance company. They cannot haul shellfish. They were not, it was not included in their policy. So it goes to show, you just have to really be diligent in listening to what's being said, what's really right there on the paper, what you're looking at. And like you said, you really do have to know what it is you're looking for as well on these certs, because there is a lot of information there, and you can, very easily get lost in what's there and say, "Oh yeah, they've got all the coverage." But if you don't verify, you don't know for sure.
You don't know for sure, and I'm glad you mentioned it again. You always want to follow up with an email to the verbal conversation you had.
Yeah,
because you never want to get into a he said, she said.
Absolutely.
If something goes wrong. The last thing I'll say about that piece is that you want to look at the entire certificate of insurance, just not certain verbiage.
Yeah.
We've seen certificates where you'll have the, hired auto liability box check, non-known, any autos, so all that's checked, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then there was a place on the cert just to the far right where it stated contingent auto liability. So we get a hold of the insurance agent. We says, well, why is this on the cert? We didn't ask for this coverage. Why is it here?
Yeah.
We couldn't get a clear answer. So we did a little bit more digging, which we don't do. We typically ask our customers to do it when they're setting the carriers up. But once we looked at this motor carrier, we could see that, one, they had a sister company. Two, they had a whole lot of owner operators. That was a red flag for us. And so we were like, you know what? Our gut told us that these loads were going to wind up with the sister motor carrier. There was no hired auto liability on it. And so we didn't approve the cert for our customer. So as a result, there was a big meeting between the higher ups in both companies, and the insurance agent was on the phone as well. And so what our customer asked us to do was, they said, okay, will you review the policy endorsements? Well, you can do that, but unless you've actually reviewed the policy itself and all the terms and conditions, you're kind of wasting your time.
Yeah, for sure.
And that could take a lot of time to do. This one exercise, but going back and forth, it took us like 4 days.
Wow.
To get it all done, because there was a lot of conversations going back and forth. Not only was probably about 36 hours, but it was over a 4-day period. Okay. Yeah. And so what we said to our customer was, our client, we says, okay, we'll do this, but we'll only do it if you also have your outside counsel, your attorney, look at it as well. We looked at it. The attorney looked at it. We both concluded there was a problem. So then and when I say that, we looked at the policy endorsements. Then we asked for the policy and did a deeper dive.
Yeah.
And we could say, okay, there's really, really a problem here. So I get back to the commercial insurance broker. There's a broker in that case. That says, okay, what's the deal here? We know that the policy that you presented to us isn't the one that we were looking for. Their response was, we're not going to show it to you. We can't allow it to be in the public space.
Wow.
Okay, we can't allow it to be in the public space, so you can't see it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So all that said to us was that we were right the first time.
Absolutely.
Now, the caveat to this whole thing is that, and other people have said it as well, is that once you see a red flag, stop digging.
Yeah.
You're not doing yourself any favors to continue. Because what happened in this situation, our client decided to use them anyway.
Wow.
So if something would have went wrong, they would have had nothing at all to fall back on.
Wow.
They had a paper trail and a whole bunch of emails that said to them, there are some things going on here that you shouldn't be involved in, and they did it anyway. So that's why I say, and other people have said it as well, it's important to establish what your risk management appetite is going to be before you even get started.
Definitely. I fully agree.
Okay. And so I'll put it this way. If you're in a crunch and you picked motor carrier A because they're the only people in the area that can get it done, and you know you're going to use them anyway, don't do a lot of digging. It's not going to do you any good.
Yeah.
If you're going to use them anyway.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. You know, if your mind is made up and you've decided I'm using this carrier, you're really not, like, there's really nothing that's going to stop you unless they literally tell you I'm stealing this load. And even then It's like, well, maybe he's just lying to me, right? You know, he's just joking.
Right.
So it's just wild. You know, I fully agree. I've seen it. I've seen it time and time again, just like what you said is when you've made up your mind, when a broker or anyone, a shipper, whoever it may be, has made up their mind that they're going to work with someone regardless. It's just better to kind of, you know, wrap up the red flag hunting, because you're going to continue to find red flags. And if there's one red flag, there's probably going to be 10 more. And you're going to waste a lot of time, you know, digging for things that are there. You're going to find them, but is that person or that broker or that shipper going to utilize the information? You know, once they've made up their mind in certain situations, like you said, there's just really no getting through to them, and they're gonna run the risk no matter what. You know, Drew, I really appreciate your time. As we wrap up here, I'd like to you know, give a quick plug, and you know, where can everyone who's listened this far in the show, where can everyone find you online and find more of your content?
Well, you can find me, Drew Singleton Wilder, on LinkedIn. And we have also a website, blrmgt.com.
Perfect. Those will all be in the show notes for anyone who's looking to get in touch with Drew and really follow a lot of his content around certificates of insurance, and really a lot of the really good content that he puts out regarding insurance and a lot of liabilities. If you guys like today's show, make sure you give it a like, show Drew some love, and like and review the podcast. And don't forget to check out our weekly newsletters. Those drop every Monday and Wednesday around 8 o'clock Central Time. And that's at ThinkFreight.io. And we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Drew, thanks for coming on today.
Hey, thank you a lot.